Well, good evening. It's good to see everyone out this evening. We're glad you've joined us. We're going to sing number 492, "O Master, Let Me Walk with Thee." We'll sing the first, second, and fourth verses of that. Then Paul will teach to us out here. Glad to see everybody out tonight, especially if you're visiting with us. Good to have everyone. 492. O Master, let me walk with thee in lowly paths of service free. Tell me thy secret, help me bear the strain of toil, the thread of care. Help me the soul of heart to move thy sun clear way, word of love. Teach me the way where to stay, and guided in the homeward way. In hope that sends a shining ray, Lord, down the future's running way. In peace and lonely thou canst get with thee, O Master, let me live.
Tonight, I'm sorry I missed last week, but I was under the weather, and you wouldn't want to be around me, and I didn't want to be around you, so we stayed home all day last Sunday, but I'm glad to be back in this class. And I'm not going to rush through this one. Micah and Nahum are two, I think, great books of prophecy. And Micah especially is important. 2 chapters devoted to the Messiah, chapters 4 and 5. And so they're very important, I think, in our study. So if I get to orating or something over some part of this lesson, understand there's some madness behind all of this. Let's see, I got to remember how to work this thing. There we go. Micah. Micah is a Hebrew name for Micah. And so you can kind of see that coming through the title of the book. There's a longer version of his name from which we get the Greek word. It's found in Jeremiah 26:18. Micaiah, and from that we get Micaias in Greek. I know a lot of this means nothing to you, but when I'm studying, I get fascinated by all of this stuff. Why is there a longer spelling of Micah? I can't tell you. It's not always the same person, but there's various spellings. But we do that in America, don't we? How many different ways of spelling Christy? Wow, I think we got 3 different ways here at Walter Hill. And so we do the same thing. Well, Hebrew and Greek does the same thing. So his name means who is like Yahweh, who is like Jehovah. What an interesting name. Who is like Jehovah? And that's what the name Micah means. Let's see, where am I? Oh, we don't want to go there yet. That's an interesting slide. We know just most about Micah from the first verse of the book, that he prophesied during the reigns of 3 kings of Judah. And we know the names of those kings are given to us: Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And so it places him prophesying between 730 BC and 690 BC, a little after Jonah, 40 to 50 years after Jonah. So that's when Micah starts prophesying. There's a lot of other things we can adjust the times of his prophecy by the things he says, but somewhere in that latter half of the 8th century BC would be correct. He's a contemporary of Isaiah, which is another interesting thing about him. Now, he is from Moresheth, and Moresheth Gath, and they believe it's down here in what is called Shephelah. And the reason I tell you that is there are 3 sections of Israel going north and south. We have the coastal plain over here, and then we have the mountains through which Jerusalem is part of. And then in between the mountains and the coastal plain is what they call the Shephelah, and it's the foothills. You have to have a hard Hebrew word for foothills, but it's the lowlands of the foothills, and that's where Moresheth Gath was located as the birthplace of Micah. So I just wanted to point that out. He ends up actually being a prophet from the southern kingdom of Judah, and he prophesies mainly against the tribe of Judah, but he also prophesies against the northern kingdom and Samaria. So he's prophesying before the fall of Samaria, which occurred in 722 BC. So that's when I said when he prophesied 730 BC, it's before, one of the things he prophesies before is before the fall of Samaria. So that's kind of interesting about Micah. Oh, let's see, what else do I want to tell you here? Let's go to the outline. He basically, here he is, he first hits Samaria and says it's going to be leveled. Assyria is pretty strong at this time, getting stronger by the minute. We interrupt here at 4 and chapter 5 for what we call the messianic prophecies of Christ coming and his kingdom. And let's see, I'm looking for one other thing here. Right here in chapter 4, verse 10, he prophesies that Judah is going to be taken captive to Babylon. Now, you got to think about how, if you were in the southern kingdom, Assyria is so strong and powerful, they're fixing to haul off the northern kingdom. They are threatening the southern kingdom. And Micah says, look, Babylon's going to carry you off. Now, I think if we put ourselves in their place, we wouldn't even believe that. So here's something about Micah's prophecy that just doesn't seem at all possible. He's prophesying this 100 years, a century ahead at least, but it's going to happen. So anyway, it's all kind of interesting the way some of these prophecies go. And there's another thing that I put in here, the way he alternates between judgments and blessings. And you can align it with that other chart if you care to. Let's see. I don't like to read all this stuff to you because you can read about him addressing the northern kingdom. Here's what I was going to tell you. He's where it says the first verse indicates that Micah prophesied in the days of Jotham. He predicts the fall of Samaria. Much of his ministry, therefore, took place before the Assyrian captivity of Israel in 722 BC. But his strong denunciations of idolatry and immorality also suggest that his ministry largely preceded the sweeping religious forms of Hezekiah. So it kind of indicates that you can squeeze his time frame up a little bit and bring it back, not down to 690 BC, but back up to about 710 BC. So as he's prophesying, the northern kingdom is crumbling. They're soon to be led off into captivity. The Assyrian Empire is reaching its zenith. It's starting to be a threat to Judah, and as I told you about the prophecy in Micah 4:10, to even imagine that Judah would be carried into captivity by Babylon just doesn't make sense. So anyway, there's several verses I looked at that I thought, well, we need to talk about some of these. They're kind of interesting, and one of the first ones occurs in chapter 1, beginning in verse 10. And I'll show you something in just a minute. First of all, the phrase, "Tell it not in Gath." You've probably heard that before. Micah wasn't the first person to say it. King David was first to say, "Tell it not in Gath." And it was after the death of Saul, and David was lamenting that death in 2 Samuel 1:20. So some commentators suggest that Micah was using that "tell it not in Gath" as a city associated with bad news. One other thing that goes with Gath, we're going to see a series of puns or plays on words in verses 10 through 15, and the first one is, "Tell it not in Gath." This one was hard for me to put into pictures, so I'll just have to say it. Gath was pronounced Gath, and the word for tell that they use, it's an unusual word for tell that he uses, is nagat. So they have got and nagat, and so he's saying that here's a pun that the nagat sounds like got, and so the words sound kind of, so he says, "Speak it not in Speaksville" is what Harold Shank used as the pun. That one was harder to see. Here's a better one. "In Beth Ophrah, roll yourself in the dust." Beit Ophrah means house of dust. And right there is in Beit Ophrah, and Ophrah is right there, circled in red. I tried to put it there in red for you. And then roll yourself in the dust. Roll yourself here, but here's dust. See? Those three letters, they're the same. That's one we could visualize. And you say, well, why are you telling me all this? Can you imagine trying to read Dr. Seuss and not understanding the rhymes? "I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am." It'd be useless to read. Well, a lot of these things in Scripture we don't see in English. And I think we miss some things, and this one is one, it would make no sense. in Beth Ophrah, roll yourself in the dust. Well, there's nothing funny, nothing poetic, nothing unusual about that. But hopefully by telling you that, it may be interesting to one or two of you, but it's interesting to me. And I tried to put some arrows here pointing to the letters in the handout so you could see those letters. Okay. Micah 4:1. Now we get into the messianic prophecies. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days, you and I know the latter days, don't we? That the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow to it. Many nations shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And when do we think that occurred? That last part? Well, most people think Acts 2, and when the gospel was first preached there on the day of Pentecost, that's when the word of the Lord went out from Jerusalem. That's just kind of simple theology, but this is a passage that becomes pretty important in that. But here's one that may be more so. Okay. And, oh, there we go. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. And that is the promise of the Messiah. Bethlehem Ephrathah. Ephrathah evidently used to be an ancient name for Bethlehem. It means fruitful or opening up. And but in Matthew chapter 2, verse 6, we'll just read it because it removes any doubt as to what Micah is referring to. Matthew 2, verse 6. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are you not the least among the rulers of Judah? For out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. And that pins that Micah's prophecy to the birth of Christ. Help me, Andy. There we go. I can't remember. It seemed like Justin used this verse the other day. I can't remember, in a sermon maybe. This is just good advice for us today, any day we live. He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
It's in a song also.
Huh?
It's in a song also.
In a song, yeah.
Almost exactly.
It's, well, we would just be good to be reminded of that very frequently. Good advice. That's what God requires. Does he require really any more of us today? Not really. It's the same thing. And that's I guess that's why I like some of these things in Micah so much. It was hard to pare down all the passages that Now, this one, I picked this one for a reason. The longer that I've been a Christian, the longer that I've been around Christian people, the more I realize we need to understand this one. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He does not retain his anger forever, because he delights in mercy. I think we as a people have trouble understanding and accepting God's forgiveness. We have too many people living with guilt. I can never be good enough.
While that is true, Jesus died to make sure that that wouldn't be true. His blood covers.
You got to wait. You got to wait.
Rerun, brother. While that is true, Jesus died and his blood covers us so that that can be true, that we will be good enough.
There's no doubt about it. Like I said,
You can't erase our memory.
you can't erase the memory. That is a. No, my point is we intellectually we understand that Christ died for our sins. Intellectually, we understand that. But emotionally, too many people are wrestling with it. Memories, yes. You can't, unless we have shock treatments, we're not going to get rid of the memories. But we have to understand what Christ has done for us and what God is willing to do, where he says he'll cast them in the sea. I mean, remove them from east to west. He gets rid of them. And he wants us to understand that. And that's what the part we have to do. We have to understand it. We can't remove the memory. That's always going to be there. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's good that we have a memory. Because sometimes, even in my own mind, I can think of things that might lead me down the wrong path. And then I remember, I used to be that person. I don't want to be that person anymore. So memory can be a good stopgap measure. But I threw this one in because I just see too many people. I've talked to too many people that can't overcome their past. If Christ overcame it for us, it's done. So anyway, I threw that one in because I think that's an important one. Oh, let's see what else we got here. We may get most of Nahum, maybe. Oh, Nahum. Nahum. His name means comfort. Nahum. Nahum. Well, it's one of those. Today in Hebrew, they would say Nahum. Back then, they would say Nahum. They would have to throw up and all this kind of stuff to pronounce it, get that guttural sound. Let's go to the Greek there, Andy. I don't know. Nahum. It's funny when you're chasing these words. How do you spell them? And all that kind of stuff. Well, it so happens that there's another Nahum in the New Testament. In Luke chapter 2, I believe it is. 3. Luke 3:25. In the genealogy of our Lord, there's another man by the name of Nahum, and no relation to the prophet, but just the same name. But again, as I said, his name means comfort or comforter. Let's see. That's basically all we know about old Nahum. The burden against Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. Elkoshite. Well, evidently there's a place called Elkosh, a village. We don't know where it is. Somebody in the 4th century, Jerome wrote that a guide pointed out a little town in Galilee and said, this is Elkosh. And he recorded that, but it's in Galilee. And here's what's interesting. Jonah, if you remember, prophesied in the mid-8th century BC. Somewhere between 750 and maybe 770 to 750 BC. When Jonah, well, it's just kaput on me. I can't even point anymore. But those are big letters, so hopefully you can see them. Right above Mount Tabor, you have Gath-Hepher. That's where Jonah was from, Galilee. Why would the other prophet against Nineveh be from Galilee? Kind of interesting, I think. So, let me put that down. Gath-Hepher, and then you go up to Capernaum, village of Nahum. How did it get its name? Village of Nahum. I think that's interesting. Not a lot of commentators pinpoint that as his home, but he must have spent some time there. I mean, if they're going to name a town after you, you got to be kind of important. I would say Nahum, the prophet from Galilee, was pretty important. And so I personally believe there's some connection there. But thank you, Andy. That's going to come in handy in just a minute, Andy. You notice I printed these maps in color for you tonight. I gave you this one because this has some good geography for you. But the next one I printed out for you is the one that's, thank you, Andy, is very important. So just hang on to it for a minute as I see where I am. I've already lost where I'm from. Well, I guess I'm ready to go this. Talking about names and their meaning. Remember I said his name means comfort. As he's talking to the Assyrians, to Nineveh, it shall come to pass that all who look upon you will flee from you and say, Nineveh is laid waste, who will bemoan her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? That's from Nahum 3:7. The word for comforters is the same basically as Nahum. If you see the 3 letters there, N, Het, and a Mem. Here, you got one extra letter there. That little, it's called a Vav. These are, easiest way I can say, these are the 3 consonants in Nahum, or comfort. These are the 3 consonants in Nahum, or comforter. This one is a vowel. That's the U. That's the U. So what I wanted you to see was you got the same 3 letters for comfort and comforters there. Again, a play on Nahum's name. So probably 3 of you are interested in that. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but probably 3 of you. Nahum. It's hard to see on here, but the book of Nahum itself tells us about when he prophesied. And as I said, Jonah was prophesying in the mid-8th century BC. Now we get to Nahum. When did he prophesy? Well, he mentioned something in his prophecy that Ashurbanipal comes down here and sacks the capital city of Egypt it's Thebes, but it appears in Hebrew as on Ammon. So that happened in 663 BC. We know it. There's records written in Assyrian records, and so we know when that happened. So he had to prophesy after Thebes was sacked by Ashurbanipal. According to the passage there in the book of Nahum, Nahum 3, verses 8 through 10. When he prophesied, the fall of Nineveh, which occurs in 612 BC, is still in the future. But it appears to be very close. He's telling the people of Nineveh, things are going to get rough. You better be building forts or whatever to protect yourself. So we know from this that between 663 BC and somewhere between 612 BC is when Nahum made his prophecy. About 120, 125 years after Jonah, which is kind of interesting because God spared Nineveh. But now, if you remember when we talked about Jonah, Nineveh was not the capital at that time, as far as we know. There was a lot of unrest and instability in Assyria, and Nineveh was not firmly established as a capital. Now, at the height of the Assyrian Empire, when Nahum is speaking to them, Nineveh is the capital. Nineveh is the capital. And so this is... Jonah, they repented. Now with Nahum, there's no hope. It's going to happen. God is going to destroy you. Nineveh is going to be no more. It'll never be rebuilt. And so that's a harsh message that he has to deliver. But I thought you might enjoy that map to have as a reference, because it shows how big the Assyrian Empire, stretching way up here all the way down into Egypt and all of Iran and Iraq down in here. So it's a very big empire. Okay, Andy, one more. Oh. Outline of Nahum is pretty easy. 3 chapters. Here's what's going to happen to you. You're going to be destroyed. I mean, what a message. So we've covered the 3 prophets, 3 minor prophets, who had prophecies against other nations. And that was Obadiah against Edom, and Jonah and Nahum against the Assyrians or Nineveh. Questions? Well, we made it through. I can't believe it. No questions? No comments? Wow. I don't know if that means I'm a good teacher or... No, I appreciate your attention and letting me ramble on about things that interest me, but let's see, who do we get next week? We got Habakkuk. Oh, that ought to be fun. We can't even pronounce it good, so we'll have fun with Habakkuk or Habakkuk or however you want to pronounce it, and maybe Zephaniah or Zechariah, whichever comes up. But again, thank you for being here. I hope you have a great week, and come back Wednesday night. We have some pretty good classes on Wednesday night too. Thank you. I know it's time.
preparation for the Lord's Supper. In just a few moments, we'll sing number 359, Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross. We'll sing the first, third, and fourth verses of this song. Jesus keep